Hello and welcome to Jtimes, where we uncover the Kabbalah take on Jewish issues and current events. With me, as always, is Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello, Dr. Laitman. Hurricane Sandy struck most of the eastern coast of the United States. It left in its wake a path of devastation and ruin. Many people lost their lives. Many more people lost their properties. Millions of people are still without power and will be so for at least the next few days. We know of communities that have just been ruined to the ground. It's a catastrophe of unprecedented scale and damage, and it really is a shock. While we are beginning to recover from this shock, it's a situation where you on the one hand try to get your life back on track, and on the other hand begin to contemplate everything that's going on around you, and really for the future how we need to conduct ourselves. We as Jews have always had this thing about unity, about sticking together, especially through hard times. And it's a question, it's a time of test right now concerning whether or not we can still do it, we can still pull together. And there's also the question of humanity versus nature. We've been going against nature for a long time now, and it's evident that there's only so much you can go against nature without it striking back. Almost 100 years ago, a Kabbalist by the name of Yehuda Ashlag wrote that this kind of track is unsustainable, that it cannot go long before nature hits back. And I want to read something that seems like it was written today, but it was written in the early 1930s. And I just want to read it and then have your comments on it.
Please.
Bear with me. Okay, here's how it goes. This one is from the book Kabbalah for the Student. The majority of it is writings of Baal HaSulam, Rav Yehuda Ashlag. And this one is taken from an essay called The Peace.
This is something that everyone can download.
Yes, it's available for free download. You can also purchase it, the hard copy, but it's also available in PDF formats and ebook formats for free download. And here's how it goes. And the wonder about it is that nature, like a skillful judge, punishes us according to our development. For we can see that to the extent that humankind develops, the pains and torments surrounding our sustenance and existence also multiply. He wrote this in the 1930s. Thus, you have a scientific, empirical basis that His providence has commanded us to keep with all our might the mitzvah of bestowal upon others, the commandment of bestowal upon others in utter precision, in such a way that no member from among us would work any less than the measure required to secure the happiness of society and its success. And as long as we are idle, performing it to the fullest, nature will not stop punishing us and take its revenge. And besides the blows we suffer today in the 1930s, we must also consider the drawn sword for the future. The right conclusion must be drawn that nature will ultimately defeat us, and we will all be compelled to join hands in following its commandments with all the measure required of us. Dr. Laitman, what is nature's commandment?
Well, this is exactly the issue. We are developing, and throughout our history, our evolution, we evolve through the levels of inanimate, vegetative, animate, and human. And as humans, we also develop for hundreds of thousands of years. And only now we actually reached a point where we feel that human society is taking on the shape of a circle, a uniform shape, meaning that we're all tied together. It's like when you take fish in a net out of the ocean, we're also found in a net, meaning connected to each other. And in that type of state, we have to begin to see what is that system in which we live. It's an integral global system, a system in which we are connected tightly and completely, and that's why we have to realize that this connection has to be a good one. So nature, as Baal Sulam writes here, forces us to engage in bestowal upon others, meaning that I have to accept everyone else in humanity as being like me, and we're all equals. And whether we like it or not, nature will force us to go in that direction, either by blows, or that we recognize it, acknowledge it, and make some steps of our own accord towards this. We're now just beginning this new phase. This phase started appearing basically 50 or 60 years ago. We started discovering that we're all interdependent. People started to lose interest in life. Divorce rates soaring, depression rates soaring, a crisis in science even, and today we've reached a crisis in economics and finance, meaning that we're seeing greater and greater escalating crises, and recently on the ecological level as well. And nature will not stop this. There's a law at work here. It's not that it may pass and it may not. We have to understand that we live in a world of laws, and these are absolute laws. And that's why it all depends on us. To the extent that we follow these laws, align ourselves with them, we'll feel good, and otherwise we won't. And it's like that in everything. You know, if you create an airplane that doesn't work for the laws of aerodynamics,
it's not going to fly.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fly with it. So it's the same in every realm. You have to know the laws and evolve accordingly. The problem is that we don't really know that well what are the laws of the development of human society. We always research things from our height and below, but we can't really research our own level, because in order to research humans, we have to be above.
It's not only that, it seems like we keep making mistakes over mistakes over mistakes, and the mistakes are piling up, and it seems like we're going in the wrong way. We're getting farther away from where we should be.
And again, it is because we cannot study ourselves. Even psychology, psychiatry, all the realms that are about the human interior, they're not really science. It's what the people collect from their experience, but not more than that. The wisdom of Kabbalah becomes revealed specifically today, in this time, because the human system has entered a global network of connection, this kind of complete global communication between us. And the wisdom of Kabbalah explains to us how we need to be connected. What is this new law of nature that's working on us? And this is where all this multifaceted crisis is coming from. It's not that there's a crisis in the stock market and in the ecology and this and that. It's one problem.
And that nature's law is this commandment that he's talking about here?
Surely, yes.
So what
It's
is it?
our mismatch with the inclusive nature. And that inclusive nature appears today as a global integrated system. And it means that we have to adapt our connections to the connection we have with nature. Our connections have to be global and integrated as well. We don't want to acknowledge this because it demands us to be like all the others, to be equal with others, to be considerate of others, to be caring for others, connected to each other through good and caring connections. These things are very, very unrealistic in our days, but we at least have to think towards this. How do we come to this? Because nature will not stand to the egoistic, narrow behavior that we have today.
So nature's law is being in good relations with one another?
Yes.
Is that it?
That's called love thy friend as thyself. In the end, this is what has to happen. Up to that level, the whole of humanity has to reach that state. You know, it's like what we learned from Noah's Ark.
Yes, but there are many people who are good people and who really are in good relations with everyone else, and they don't have a better life than anybody else.
No. To simply be a good person, as you know, you would say about some people today, that's not enough. You have to learn what is that system you're in right now. You as if exist within a program of connection, and we're all interconnected. Everyone is connected to everyone else. And this is something we see today. It surfaces from researches that psychologists and sociologists are doing today. And this is because we have to adapt ourselves to this system, to these new laws that we discover. You know, just imagine that we would discover a new law of nature, any law, and we wouldn't keep it. So immediately we would feel that it's to our detriment. We would be harmed. Now, if we discover laws on the inanimate, vegetative, or animate levels, then there's no problem because we carry it out, because it's not directly on us. It's with respect to the earth, the planet, the animals, and so on. But here we're talking about a law that works in the connections between us, which means we have to work against our ego, against our bad connections to each other, where everyone wants to keep his individuality and his self and so on. So then what turns out is that this law of unity, of mutual guarantee, of integrality, of don't do to your friend what's hated upon you, what you hate to be done to you, and love thy friend as thyself, that we can't really do. We have to be educated for this.
Why can't we keep this law?
Because it's against our nature. We, in our nature, are completely opposite to this law. And so today, in our generation, we've reached a state where this law begins to appear.
That's nature's punishment?
It's not a punishment. Nature appears as more and more integrated. We have to show ourselves as more and more integrated society.
I'm just saying it because he wrote it here. He wrote punishment, so...
Yes, but that's not what punishment is about. Listen. If I, right now, find myself existing in a sphere that is totally integrated, and I don't fit this sphere, there's a certain tension.
Right, there's a dissonance.
Yes, this potential difference, imbalance. So then I feel that imbalance as troubles, problems. And they could be all sorts of problems. It could be the eco-disasters, the financial crisis, family unit disintegrating, plagues erupting, volcano erupting, tsunamis. It can happen in any way. And we can also research how exactly things will unfold, but maybe we'll come to that in later programs. But what's important for us to know is that this is where the problem lies, which is we have to adapt, align ourselves with nature. This has to be our main concern. And so, to the extent that we are not aligned with it, And as we're moving forward, meaning our ego keeps growing from day to day, we're evolving, and that evolution really only is about the desire within us that becomes greater and greater and wants to control and wants to know and so on. If we don't adapt our desires, that our connections between our desires, so that we're all connected like one family in a beautiful, loving connection, if we don't do that, we become more and more opposite to nature. And then we feel in greater and greater contrast to nature, to the point that certainly more and more disasters and blows will happen, and in more ways. And this is also something you can find in the Kabbalah books, and basically from the beginning of the 21st century, we're in this predicament. And the problem can only be one. How much can we connect together in a good way? And that leads us to the Jewish problem.
That was my next question. Yes, okay, so just go ahead and tell me.
Because how to carry out that law of matching human society to the general law of nature, which you can also call Elohim or providence or the creator, meaning because it's the supervising law, the all-inclusive, overarching law. So this is something we discover through the wisdom of Kabbalah because it's exactly intended for it. It was hidden throughout history in order to become revealed specifically when we need it. And I'm talking right now only about the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah, not what people usually use the name Kabbalah for. So, it turns out that we, the Jewish people, who always kept the wisdom of Kabbalah within our midst, just as I have received it from my own teacher, Rabash, Shalom Ashlag, and he received it from Kabbalist Yehuda Ashlag, and he continued it from the Ari, and then from Rashbi, and from Moses and Abraham, and so on. If we look at this entire chain, we see that the wisdom of Kabbalah comes to us from the origin of the Jewish people. It exists within us. According to the wisdom of Kabbalah, we existed until the ruin of the temple together, and because we broke the connection between us, we fell from what's called love thy friend as thyself to what's called unfounded hatred. Then we went to exile, and we stopped being as a nation. In our era, we're back in the land of Israel and trying to connect, and it doesn't really work. Why? Because we have to connect according to the same model, the same format that we had before, which is love thy friend as thyself. And now, specifically now, as this global crisis is escalating and appearing, closing in on us, we have to understand that firstly, the people of Israel must become connected. It's up to us first to carry out that law of nature within our people. This is the meaning of all Israel is responsible for each other, Gur and Tor's for each other, and so on, to the point that we can set an example for the whole of humanity, and that's called a light of the nations.
I have to say that so far we are given the example of the exact opposite. Even in the face of such a catastrophe, I read in the paper today someone writing an essay about the election, about he votes for one candidate and he's going all against those who support the other candidate. I don't want to mention names right now, but then he wraps it all up in how terrible it is that such a catastrophe like Sandy happens and you think about your loved ones, and then he goes on rattling about the election. So he uses this catastrophe as a cover-up to really present, to really promote his candidate, the candidate that he supports. So even here you can't see any unity.
Nothing to do with politics, but I'll say one thing since you asked, that certainly if we were unified, connected together, we would see unanimously, we would understand who we need to vote for, because we need to understand that there are laws about this. There's the responsibility, the debt, and happens through a certain person. So,
okay, so let's say
we have to change our ways in relation to that. On the other hand, without anything to do with the elections, I'm saying that if we don't begin to connect as Jews everywhere in the world between us, and especially build in the country, land of Israel, a unified, connected society that is connected through love thy friend, then we will draw all these hurricanes upon ourselves. Because indeed this is very threatening and scary for the future. In the meantime, it's happening to humanity as a whole. But we know that as much as humanity suffers, it later directs all that suffering towards us. That's why it'll happen. So what do we need to do? Only learn how the wisdom of Kabbalah gives us all these possibilities to connect between us. And that will clean all that the anti-Semitic attitudes. The nations of the world will begin to relate to us respectfully and as an important part of humanity, because we can provide this link to salvation. We see that not the U.S. government or the United European nations, no one in the world today, and from month to month we see how no one has any solution. It's like everything is escalating and deteriorating, and there's nothing to do.
What you're saying is exactly what he writes here, and what Ashlag also writes at the end of the introduction to the book of Zohar, that if the Jews pull together, and also he also talks about studying Kabbalah. But I want to ask this. I understand your message, and I want to prevent all those catastrophes in general, and especially I want to prevent them from hitting the Jews. What do I need to do? As a Jew, as a person, what do I need to do?
I recommend all our brothers to first of all enter our website.
Kabbalah.info.
Yes. And look at the materials there. There's a lot of materials in video form, in articles of the great Kabbalists, and how they explain to us that we have to unite, that we have to connect with each other in a certain way. And only reading that material awakens a certain influence upon us. It's called surrounding light. And that brings us closer to this higher influence, illumination, that begins to take care of us and connect us with each other.
It sounds mystical, and I know you're not a mystical person.
It's not mystical. It's a force that works within nature, within the world. To the extent that you're drawn to something, it draws to you. We always work like that, according to that principle in human society, whether you're aware of it or unaware of it. And it's the same thing here. Today, there's a lot of research about this. There's also what's called the wisdom of the crowds that is relevant to this.
Wisdom of the crowd, yes.
And therefore, we have to use this. The wisdom of Kabbalah discovers this way before what the sociologists today discover. And so we can improve the situation, both our individual situation, bring ourselves to security and safety, and also elevate the entire world and lead the world towards balance with nature. It's all in our hands. So there's no reason to wait for anyone to change anything if we won't feel that the future of ourselves and our children and our grandchildren and the general fate is in the hands of humanity. General fate of humanity is in the hands of the Jews, and they're right. We have to understand that eventually we can't escape our mission. It is said that we have to be a light of the nations, and everyone agrees that there is some unique thing about this people. But instead of agreeing on our negative function in the world, thinking that we bring all troubles, because now it is time, we weren't able to do this before, but now it is time for us to be able to implement this within ourselves and give the method to the world, how everyone can be happy and harmoniously connected and discover the full extent of life.
Okay, so if I want to summarize your words, what we need to do is to unite so that we are in harmony, in sync with nature's law. And the way to do it is by studying Kabbalah, which is exactly what the Rav Ashlag is saying here and in all of his writings.
We also have lectures and lessons and all the different
and you can
ways
find
to study.
all of that at Kabbalah.info. All the material is free. All the texts, all the books, all the videos,
There's
everything
also
is free.
a virtual education center.
We have a learning center that you can join, an education center.
In short, let's try.
And if we do that, then we become a light to the nations,
Yes.
right? And if we unite, then we
Yes,
become a
for
light
sure.
to the nations.
And that Sandy, let's hope it'll be the last one.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laitman. Thank you for being with us. See you at Kabbalah.info.